Shalom, this is Prophet Jonathan Bridges, and welcome to Building Bridges, where we not only desire to build people, but to build myself in the things of Yahweh, and also making connections or bridges to people all over the world to connect with the same like mind. Well, here we are. We're still dealing with the title, I have a lot on my mind, and this is part 2. Remember, I left y'all off on a cliffhanger with a little something left over. So we finna get right on back into it today. We were dealing with Genesis chapter 13, verses 5 through 18. And when we left off at verse 7, Genesis 13, verse 7. And what we were talking about the last time, just to quickly recap, we were talking about Lot being a representation for something, and the something that he was a representation of was a lot on your mind. Remember, we spoke about the homophone, and we were saying that the conundrum was that it meant two different things, but did it really mean two different things? That was the puzzle that we was trying to put together. Well, we're figuring out that the lot, by definition, a large number or amount of something, is still connected to what the Hebrew meaning of Lot's name was, which was a thin veil or something that covered your vision. So we continued on forward. After we got through dealing with Erykah Badu, the book of Badu, talking about the bag lady carrying all this baggage, we left off at verse 7. We were dealing with Abraham and Lot, on a land together. So let's just go hop straight on into it. Verse 7 reads, again, Genesis chapter 13, verse 7. Verse 7 reads, "And there was a strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle, and the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled in the land." Well, remember when we dealt with the also, we were talking about that Lot also went with Abram, remember? And when we dealt with that word also, I say a lot of times people don't pay attention to those little words. Also means in addition to, and to is an adverb that can mean excessively. Well, here's the also right here that we're dealing with. This is something that I think nobody's never read in the scriptures before. Verse 7, it says that there was a strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and Lot's cattle. But this is the part that I think nobody paid attention to. It said, and the Canaanite and the Perizzites dwelled in the land. So what are we talking about here? What we're talking about is a scientific term that's called displacement. How we gonna mix science into the word of God? Well, you got to understand that the Father created everything. All knowledge and information came from him. So at the end of the day, if science proves the word, I'm all for it. And this is where it is. We're about to use science to show you that this connects to what the scriptures is talking about. So Lot was on his mind. But it said also, so the Canaanite and Perizzite was there, and the term that we're using here is called displacement. What is displacement? Well, displacement, according to www.dictionary.com, is when an object enters water, it pushes water out to make room for itself. The object pushes out the volume of water that is equal to its own volume. Okay, I know that might sound kind of a little cryptic for those who never really delved into that type of science. There's a fable called The Crow and the Pitcher. And in this fable, the crow approached a pitcher that had water in it, but the water was so low in the pitcher. What the crow did was he went to get rocks to drop into the pitcher of water. And after he dropped enough rocks down into the water, what that did is cause displacement of the water to rise the water up where the crow could actually get a drink. So this is what was happening in the land. So when you have a lot on your mind, come on here, displacement takes place. Come on here, things get loaded down into you and it causes what's in you to rise up and be displaced. We going somewhere with this right here. Now I keep forgetting to tell y'all I got my studio audience here today, my wife. All right. And shout out to my granddaughter because she said, make sure you say something about me, Pawpaw, on the next one. Well, we like to play with the show of Martin. You know how Brother Man always said he was on the 5th floor. Well, here it is. We are on what? Part 2. Shout out to you, Mia. We on part 2. That was a little shout out for my baby girl there. But displacement here is what's taking place. There was so much on the mind. Lot was on his mind. The Canaanites, remember I said land is representation is a representation of the mind. The Canaanites and the parasites was there. So look at this. If you keep getting filled with rocks meaning somebody else's weight, what happens is it pushes out what's in you and replaces it with what's in them. Think about that. Displacement. It pushes out what's inside of you. And not only is it pushing out what's in you, it replaces in you what was inside of them. So if we don't free ourselves from the lot, come on here, the stuff, those things that have us filled up, what's going to happen is going to push those things out that's in us. Look, I know you saying that I'm trying to keep it together. I'm trying to deal with this stuff, but it's hard for you to deal with somebody else's stuff. Come on here, and your own stuff. Because what happens is, like I just said, displacement causes it to be pushed out or it spills out. But the worst thing that happens is we carry so much of other people's weight, so much of our own weight, so much of our own baggage is that it forces out what's inside of us. And sometimes what gets forced out of us is the things that Yahweh desires us for us to do. Is that all right? All right. See, science can work with the word. So what we're trying to do is to get to a place where we're not being displaced, where the things of Yahweh is not being displaced on the inside of us. Stop allowing the crow, come on here, to drop inside of you things that belong to him. And be filled with the things of Yahweh. All right. Well, let's move on. All right. Verse 8. Let's look. Matter of fact, let's look at these two verses right here. Verse 8 and 9. 8 reads, and Abram said unto Lot, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we are brethren. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself. Here we go. I pray thee from me. Come on here. Get away from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, I'll go to the right. And if thou depart to the right, then I'll go to the left. So what's happening right here? When you have a lot going on, what happens is it makes you choose between being a peacemaker or a peacekeeper. Right here, Abram handled that conflict like a peacemaker and not a peacekeeper. Well, you might ask yourself, what is the difference? Well, here we go. There's a difference between being a peacemaker and a peacekeeper. Yeshua said in the scriptures when he was speaking to the people on the mount, he said, blessed are the peacemakers, right? So the peacemaker is better than the peacekeeper, and here's why. The peacekeeper avoids where the peacemaker engages. Stick with me. The peacekeeper minimizes conflict with no conversation, whereas the peacemaker rectifies situations with crucial crucial conversations. The peacekeeping is situated just before peace enforcement. So in other words, if you're peacekeeping, what's going to happen is going to be situated just before peace enforcement. In other words, it's going to be time to pull out the big guns when you're just peacekeeping. Don't allow the unnecessary to occur. So when you're peacekeeping, you're constantly holding on to things rather than actually engaging them. You're not dealing with them. Peacekeepers got to ask themselves at the end of the day, when you're keeping peace, in other words, keeping quiet, avoiding things, whose peace are you keeping? That's a heavy question right there. Whose peace at the end of the day are you keeping? Because you're not keeping your own peace. You're keeping somebody else's peace. By you being quiet, you're satisfying that person by not saying nothing. And actually, when you really look at that thing and unravel it, you're not really even keeping that person's peace. Because what ultimately ends up happening is that person can tell if they have any type of sensitivity about them that you're bottling up something. And what ends up happening is that they walk around or they ask the question, what's wrong with you? So now that means that their peace is disturbed. So peacekeepers, you got to ask yourself, whose peace are you keeping? Peacemaking employs nonviolent techniques to stop conflict and retain peace. So this is what Abram was doing, was that he was trying to retain peace in this situation. So he did two steps right here, if you really pay attention to what the scriptures is saying. In the first step, he identifies the problem and not the symptom. The problem or the root cause was all of the stuff. This is what we're talking about in this message. The problem is all of this stuff, all of this weight, all of these things that's in our mind trying to push stuff out. And he didn't deal with the symptom. And the symptom there is nothing but the end failure. In other words, the strife. For example, when you're dealing with a problem and a symptom, the problem is you got a cold. And the symptom is that you sneezing and coughing and, and vomiting or whatever. So I say that the symptom is the end failure, because if you had prevented the cold to begin with, you wouldn't have this failure in your system. So this is what he did. He employed, he identified what the problem was, what the root cause of it is. A lot of times we go straight to the failure and not what the cause is. And this is how Abraham handled this. Abram at the time, of course. Second, he proposed a solution. A lot of time our objective is to win the fight other than to win the peace. Abram had to believe that Yahweh was going to bless him no matter what Lot chose at the end of the day. Also, if you pay attention to this in the scriptures, understanding Abram's position as Lot's uncle, he gave him an offer that he can't refuse. But he could have given him an offer that he can't refuse. Wait a minute, I just repeat that. Yeah, he gave him an offer that he can't refuse, and then he could have given him an offer that he can't refuse. I know that sounds real confusing. One offer that you can't refuse means that the things that I'm giving you can't pass on it, because there's so much, you know what I'm saying, that I can gain from this. But the other offer that you can't refuse is like when The Godfather spoke, when Don Corleone spoke. I'm going to give you an offer that you can't refuse. And that type of offer means that you can't refuse it because there's going to be consequences. In other words, Abraham could have gotten down with Lot and his people and said, hey, you gonna do this right here and I'm gonna do this. But he gave him the opportunity to make a choice on his own. Is that all right? All right. So he had to choose between being a peacemaker and peacekeeper. When you're a peacemaker, come on here, you understand that you have to be able to make decisions that's going to affect you positively and not be a peacekeeper that's going to affect you negatively. All right, well, let's move on then. So when you have a lot on your mind, you end up making choices that adversely affect you. So let's move on. In verse 10, it reads, and Lot, right, lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan that is well watered everywhere, before Yahweh destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of Yahweh, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest to Zoar. So look at this scripture right here. We have already identified what Lot means, that his name in the Hebrew, it means veil. And veil, we determined by looking it up that it means, one of the meanings was a thin covering that hides something or stops you from seeing something clearly. There were several definitions to that, but I wanted to really deal with this one in particular, specifically, because a thin covering that hides something or stops you from seeing something clearly. Thin there is a word that's synonymous with that is insignificant. And covering, when we're dealing with covering, we're talking about surface clutter. So a insignificant surface covering that hides something or stops you from seeing something clearly. Here we go, baby. This is something that I added here. I had to go ahead and throw these in a note because I really feel like this fits perfectly. So the insignificant things that's in our life is clutter. Lots. Come on here. Lots by definition, right? What did lot mean? It meant a large number or amount of something. So in our lives, the insignificant things that's in our lives is clutter. A lot of us, we don't pay attention to the clutter that's around us because as time goes on, just like a bum can't smell himself, after a while you can't see the stuff that's around you. And clutter, according to a study that I was looking at by Barbara Hemphill, clutter actually has 5 different types. But let's look at what clutter is by definition. Clutter is a collection of things lying about in an untidy mass. So clutter is stuff. But according to Barbara Hemphill, she said that there's 5 different types of clutter. The first one is physical. And the physical clutter is typically the tangible things in our everyday lives, like our clothes, jewelry, our garage space that's so packed that we can't even get our vehicles into it no more. These are the tangible things that we can actually touch. Your house being untidy, stuff just being all over the place. These are the physical types of clutter. You have emotional clutter. Emotional clutter is negative thought patterns. All of the I can't voices bombarding us from within. That is emotional clutter. Then you have digital clutter. For example, unopened emails, unorganized photos and videos on your computer or in your phone with no type of naming system, stuff just scattered all over the place. Then you have mental clutter. which is somewhat like emotional clutter. As we said, emotional clutter is bombarding you from within. Mental clutter are voices that bombard us from outside sources, whether it can be a loved one, a friend, relative, a co-worker, your supervisor, whoever it may be. These are voices that's bombarding us from outside. And then this is the last one that Barbara Hemphill said that a lot of people skip over is spiritual clutter. And what is spiritual clutter? Is like the lack of forgiveness, the lack of peace that's on the inside of us. So clutter is anything that keeps you from living the life that you're meant to live. Anything that stops you, come on here, from accomplishing the things that Yahweh desires you to do. And according to Barbara Hemphill, she said all clutter have one main cause. And I thought this was heavy. I wish I'd have thought of this. Clutter is nothing but postponed decisions. Think about that. So clutter, synonymous with lot. So what happens is a lot of times that we have clutter that's around us that's wasting energy. Just think about it. When you don't have things organized, it causes you to waste energy. So what you end up doing is, instead of just moving forward in the things of Yahweh, what clutter will make you do is stop and say, hey, I gotta run and go do A. I gotta run and go do B. Then I gotta bag up and go do C. All right, let me move forward. Now let me get to D. Oh man, I forgot. Here go E over here. Let me bag up and go do F. So you're wasting energy. And what happens is, with this physical and emotional clutter, come on, your mind being bogged down from thoughts on the inside of you, mental clutter, stuff coming from the outside. What happens is your mind is constantly fighting through these different types of clutter, and it keeps you from actually flowing and using the energy effectively, come on here, and incisively to do the things that Yahweh desires you to do. Come on here. In other words, you're like Cameo in his song. Back, forth and forth, back, forth and forth as we go. So you just constantly back and forth, swinging from the left and to the right, just constantly wasting energy and never taking one step in front of the other step, in front of the other step, going forward into the things of Yahweh. So this is surface clutter. Come on here. These are the things that we consider insignificant. Come on here. Some of y'all pause and just think about it. Look around your house. Look in your own proximity in your bedroom, in your area where you study. And for ladies and men, look in your vehicles. What do your vehicles look like? If I climbed in your vehicle with you right now, would it be soda cans and food wrappers and trash and stuff all over the seats, all over the floor? You see what I'm saying? It seems insignificant, but those things weigh on your mind. It's like the little rocks that the crow was dropping in the water. Come on here. And what happens is it starts to push out what you should be focused on, which is that living water. All right. So there it is. Let's move on. So we done dealt with displacement right there, right? And now we just got through dealing with clutter. So this is what happens when your mind is cluttered and wrapped up and filled up with all these different types of things. It causes you to make choices like Lot made. And what it says according to the scripture is that Lot lifted up his eyes, come on here, and beheld all the plain of Jordan, right? Let's drop down to verse 11. And then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves one from another. So according to the scriptures here, it said that Lot lifted up his eyes, and with all of that clutter, come on here, all of what's on our minds, let's put ourselves into the shoes of this thing right here. With all of that clutter, On your left, that's my right. Yeah, that's my right. On my right and on my left, all of that clutter, what happens is it causes you to have horse blinders. Come on here. And when you have horse blinders, that means that you can only see what's in front of you. And when you have this type of vision, it causes missed opportunities. And what we need in this day right now is spiritual peripheral vision. Hey, I like that right here. Spiritual peripheral vision. And it's going to cause you to be able to see everything around you. But when you have all of that stuff around you, you're constantly missing opportunities. And these opportunities put you into what's called, and constantly missing, opportunities put you into what's called survival mode. And when your vision is not connected to Yahweh, you'll always be in survival mode. The habits that you create in survival will keep you from wanting to thrive. So whatever you're doing right now to survive, because of all of the stuff that's going on, it'll keep you from thriving. How many know that something that helps you to survive will keep you from living? Ooh, that's heavy right there. Something, survival mode, will keep you in a place where you're not actually living. Come on here. I know a guy said in the song that a lot of people die, but not a lot of people live. How many of us are living? And if you're bogged down and clogged up with things, come on here, you're not going to be able to live because you're constantly in survival mode. All right, we almost there, family. All right, we on the last leg of this. Let's go to verse 12. And verse 12 reads, "And Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom." So what this is saying to us, that after we seen that Lot got his chance to pick what he wanted to pick, now Abraham have what's called Lot's leftovers. And that's all right. It's all right to have leftovers. Don't worry, when you have leftovers, it's always the best piece. Come on here, it's always the best portion, because all the seasoning, come on here, of what Yahweh is doing, come on here, is getting down into it. So a lot of times when you see what you see, you miss what you need to see. Come on here. Yeah, that's heavy right there. When you see what you see, you miss what you need to see. So you miss out on what the Father is getting ready to do. Come on here, what we call the leftovers. But look at this. Let's pause right here. Yeah, we're going to pause again. This was part 2. I hope you enjoyed this. We're snapping this into little bit of pieces. Come on here, because what's going to be left over at the end is the leftovers. Come on here. It's going to get real spicy and saucy for you. I promise you, we finna wrap this thing up on the next time we get into this. Stay tuned for part 3. I got a lot on my mind. Come on here. I got a lot of clutter. I got a lot of stuff. And if this message has blessed you, come on here, if it's blessed you tremendously, pass this on to somebody else. Tell them to like, comment, and subscribe. And if it's blessed them, tell them to do the same thing, to like, comment, and subscribe. Come on here to this message so that we can continue to salt the earth with the word, and to, as my wife gestured, to build on the things of Yahweh. So I hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned for part 3. Shalom.